LSAC. Hi, my name is Angelo Minfield, and I am the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer here at the Law School Admission Council. On behalf of all of us here at LSAC, welcome to Strategy Booster, a set of resources to optimize your study approach. Law is an incredible field. It has the power to shape individuals' lives and to make our society a better place. We are so glad you are embarking on this journey to law school and ultimately to the legal profession. We look forward to supporting you each step of the way, including preparing for the LSAT. Registering for the LSAT is a huge step in pursuing a legal education. We applaud you for taking that step and want to equip you to do your best on test day. First, I want to let you know that even though the LSAT is important, it is just one single element of a strong, holistic law school application. Your LSAT score does not define you, and it is not meant to. Rather, it is one opportunity to demonstrate your current capability in certain specific areas. As you may have heard, the LSAT has recently changed. Now, the LSAT no longer contains an analytic reasoning section, commonly known as logic games. In its place, we have added a second logical reasoning section. That means the scored portion of the LSAT now consists of two logical reasoning sections and one reading comprehension section. Given these changes, you may be wondering how to best prepare for the LSAT. At LSAC, we've developed Strategy Booster with you in mind. These resources are designed to help you navigate changes to the test and ultimately do well on the LSAT. To start, we are excited to provide you with stories and experiences about preparing for the LSAT. We reached out to a diverse group of thousands of people who recently took the LSAT. Some of their stories and experiences will be shared with you today. Overall, most people reported struggling at first while studying, but found that things got better over time as they refined their approach to studying for the LSAT. They shared valuable information about how to use effective strategies and resources, stay engaged, and ultimately succeed. We're sharing their stories and strategies so that you can get a better sense of what to expect and how to better prepare as you study and practice for the LSAT. To help you apply the strategies shared within these stories, we are also providing you with new free LSAT prep resources. These resources include practice problems and full-length practice tests. You will also receive enhanced feedback to help you learn from your performance and do well. We have found that the more practice tests people complete and the more people learn from feedback about their performance on practice tests, the better they are able to improve their LSAT score. And because we value your perspective, we'll invite you to share your own thoughts and experiences as well. Again, we wish you all the best as you prepare. Please know that I and my colleagues at LSAC care about you and are rooting for you. We are so thrilled for you and all that you will bring to the legal profession. LSAC. Discover Strategy Booster today.
Welcome to everyone who joined the live. Right now, I am studying, so this is a live stream basically to watch me study. So, thank you for your comments, guys. Welcome. It's nice to meet you guys. So, definitely subscribe, like the video, share it. But in this YouTube live today, I'm just studying for the LSAT, so it's going to be a quiet study session because I want to see you so you guys can see what I'm like when I'm actually studying and doing my schoolwork.
Okay, let's take a look at how you did on this question. First, I hope you noticed that this is an RRE question. This is not a necessary assumption question. We're asked to help to explain, right? Help to explain something. But actually, upon closer inspection, what is it that we're asked to explain? Why this, right? Why this? And what is this? This is just the conclusion. You see the conclusion indicator. So, in other words, we're being asked to explain why this is the conclusion, which means we're asked to explain why this follows from this. And that's a good question, because as it stands, there's a big fat question mark over here. I'm not sure what's happening. How is it that these claims amount to this conclusion? And the reason why I understand is because the argument makes a huge assumption. It makes a huge assumption. So if we find the assumption, we have helped to explain why the conclusion follows from the premise. So in this particular question, RRE and assumption just collapse into each other. Right? You're just doing the same thing. Okay, so now, of course, this doesn't always happen, right? In fact, most RRE questions aren't like this because most RRE questions don't have an argument baked into them, right? They just give you phenomena, and the phenomena just seem kind of confusing and, sometimes contradictory, sometimes irreconcilable, and then we're just supposed to find a hypothesis that explains it. But here, as it happens, we're kind of just doing an assumption question. Right, okay, so now there is a lot that's difficult about this question. One of the things that's difficult just is right here in the context, where the astronomer tells us that earlier estimates of the distance of certain stars from Earth would mean that these stars are about 1 billion years older than the universe itself, which is impossible, right? Like, this is just an impossible scenario. Okay, so what do we do? How do we reconcile this scenario? Well, there are lots of ways to do it. One way is just say that, you know what, the universe is older than we thought, right? The universe is older. Another way is to say that stars are younger than we thought, right? Because right now it just doesn't make any sense. The stars can't be 1 billion years older than the universe. So either the universe is older or the stars are younger, okay? That is a crucial realization. That's a crucial realization.
What happened to my stuff? My internet. Hello?
Okay, let's take a look at huge assumption. It makes a huge assumption. So if we find the assumption, we have helped to explain why the conclusion follows from the premise. So in this particular question, RRE and assumption just collapse into each other. You're just doing the same thing. Okay, so now, of course, this doesn't always happen, right? In fact, most RRE questions aren't like this because most RRE questions don't have an argument baked into them, right? They just give you phenomena, and the phenomena just seem kind of confusing and, sometimes contradictory, sometimes irreconcilable, and then we're just supposed to find a hypothesis that explains it. But here, as it happens, we're kind of just doing an assumption question. Right, okay, so now there is a lot that's difficult about this question. one of the things that's difficult just is right here in the context, where the astronomer tells us that earlier estimates of distance of certain stars from Earth would mean that these stars are about 1 billion years older than the universe itself, which is impossible, right? Like, this is just an impossible scenario. Okay, so what do we do? How do we reconcile this scenario? Well, there are lots of ways to do it. One way is just say that, you know what, the universe is older than we thought, right? The universe is older. Another way is to say that stars are younger than we thought, right? Because right now it just doesn't make any sense. The stars can't be 1 billion years older than the universe. So either the universe is older or the stars are younger, okay? That is a crucial realization. That's a crucial realization, because without that realization, it's not clear how you're going to interpret this. Help to resolve the earlier conflict between the ages of these stars and the age of the universe. But with that interpretation, now we have a path to figuring out what this astronomer is talking about. Okay, so now let's keep reading. Right, my estimate of the distance indicates that the stars are much farther away than previous. Okay, so earlier estimates of the star, right? So this is Earth, right? This is the star. Earlier estimate thinks that, oh, it's over here. Now what? Now we think that the star is like, way farther out. Okay, let's keep going. And the farther away the stars are, right, the farther away, the greater their intrinsic brightness must be, given their appearance to us on Earth. Okay. See, this is also really tough to understand. There's this relationship between three entities, and I do want to talk about that, but before I do, I'm wondering if you can just approach this formally, because you do have a shot at getting this right. If you thought about what this means, okay, if you thought about what this means and you realize that there was an inference to mine out, which is that either the universe is older or the stars are younger. Okay, so if you realize that, then you might have a chance of approaching this just kind of formally. Meaning, look, they told us distance is greater now, which means intrinsic brightness is higher now, right? These stars are now intrinsically brighter. And so if you're going to say that the new estimates of distance resolve the earlier conflict, you just have to say that the greater the intrinsic brightness, the what? The younger the star. That resolves the conflict. And that's why C is the correct answer. The brighter a star, the younger it is. Now, I mentioned that I want to go back to this idea because it is it's kind of a tough idea to understand, I think. You have this concept called distance, right? Distance meaning distance from observer, okay? How far something is from the observer. And then you have this other idea called the apparent brightness. And then you have this other idea called the intrinsic brightness. These are all different ideas. Distance is probably the easiest to understand, just how far you are from something, right? Think about an airplane. An airplane is not that far from us in comparison to a star. A star is a lot farther away, okay? Now think about apparent brightness. Apparent brightness is just how bright something appears to us. That's a different concept from intrinsic brightness. Okay, intrinsic brightness is how actually bright an object is. For example, candlelight is not as intrinsically bright as an airplane light, which is not as intrinsically bright as a star. Okay, but all three can have the same apparent brightness if you what? If you mess around with distance, right? I mean, you take that star, which is super, super, super bright, and you just increase the distance by a lot. You just throw it towards the end of the universe. You know how bright that super bright star, the intrinsically super bright star, will appear to us? Not bright at all. In fact, we probably can't even see it. Right? So a mere candle flame will appear brighter than that star because the candle flame is a lot closer to us. Okay, and you can think about an airplane as sort of a, in between kind of thing. But you see, so all three of these concepts are related to each other. So that's what the astronomer is talking about here when he says, the distance, right? You see what changed here with the distance. We used to think it was here like this. So the apparent brightness, of course, didn't change. This is the thing that stayed fixed. We're still standing on the surface. We're still looking at the star. It still looks the same, right? It's not like all of a sudden the star looks brighter, or then something happened to the star, right? So the apparent brightness didn't change. But if the distance changed, right? If there's change in this distance, which the astronomer said, you push the star farther out, which means what must be true about this? It must be intrinsically brighter. Otherwise, how can it look the same? That's the logic of this argument. Now, like I said, that's just these three concepts, right? There's still another key concept that's missing, which is the age. What does the intrinsic brightness have to say about the age of the star? Well, C tells us the brighter the star is, the younger it is. And that's how this gets resolved. Okay, so that's why this question is, I think conceptually this question is very challenging. And look what they did in answer choice D, which is so devious. They put in something here, how bright a celestial object appears, right? The apparent brightness, this concept here, depends on how far away, depends on the distance. I mean, of course it does. Right? We talked about that already. Of course it does. And in fact, that was already implicit in here because this is one way to talk about it. This is another way to talk about it. You're just talking about the same thing. Okay, this is the farther away the stars is, that's the distance. You're talking about the greater the intrinsic given their appearance, right? The farther away, well, the brighter it must be given how it appears to us in terms of brightness. And from a different perspective, you're just saying, well, the apparent brightness depends on the distance. Yeah. You see, that's why D is not the right answer, because it's redundant. We already established this relationship in this premise. I mean, you're kind of just approaching it from a different angle, right? But even with this being true, you see what's crucially missing in answer choice D is any relation to the concept of age. With this being true, you can't count on C because, right, they're separate answers. Just D alone doesn't patch up the assumption hole. Right? It doesn't help explain why, because we still don't know how any of this relates to age. Okay, so now we have three answers left. The stars are the oldest objects yet discovered in the universe. This is not relevant because we're not trying to do a comparison of, what are the oldest objects in the universe? Is it stars, or is there something older than stars? Who cares, right? Because, like we said, all we care about is that these particular stars these certain stars that we're talking about, now that we know that their intrinsic brightness is greater, how does that resolve the conflict between the earlier estimates of age and the age? It has nothing to do with what, we just need to say that these stars, because they're brighter, they're younger. Okay, and B is quite similar. B says the younger the universe, the more bright stars it has. But it's not like, okay, so B is saying, you take a young universe, you take an old universe. Which one has more brighter stars? The younger ones. Okay, so as the universe gets older and older and older, what happens? Its bright stars start to fade, you have fewer and fewer bright stars. Fine, but again, what does that have to do with this? You see what I mean? Like, once you identify what assumption is actually missing, I think especially E, becomes very ridiculously irrelevant. Like, new telescopes allow astronomers to see a greater number of distant stars. I mean, come on. Right? At least A and B kind of made a half-assed attempt to be relevant. E is not even trying. In this last set of necessary assumption questions, I want to take a look at arguments whose logic can be framed using the language of sets, memberships in sets, and overlaps between sets. Now, I want to emphasize that it's really not the only way to understand what's happening in an argument. Often there are many different frames that you can use to understand what's happening in the argument. But I want to focus on the framing using sets and memberships because it's just a really powerful frame. It's a very powerful tool that can be applied to lots of different questions. This was one in particular. And actually, in fact, it's probably kind of unintuitive to use the framing of sets to understand what's going on here. But that's even better, because I think it'll showcase just how powerful this tool is. Something like this that you probably wouldn't even think of in sets, okay? So anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at this argument. We start with context, and then premise, and then conclusion. And this is a conditional conclusion, right? So conclusion here, premise here, and this is all context, contextual information. Many important types of medicines that develop from substances discovered in plants that only grow in tropical rainforests. Great. So what is this? I mean, it's just kind of telling us a causal, right? Causal chain of events, right? You got these tropical rainforests, right? Out of which you get some plants, right? Out of whom we are able to extract substances from which we're able to develop into important meds, right? Or medicines. Now, this is, of course, just a partial causal story, right? I'm not saying, like, obviously researchers were involved, right? Nobody needs to say that. Obviously, researchers were involved in developing these important medicines, but, you know, in terms of what this contextual statement is saying, you can frame it as this, right? This causal chain of events. We got these tropical rainforests, out of which we got some plants, out of which we extracted some substances, from which we made important medicines. Great, fantastic. Now what? Right, now the argument. Look, there are thousands of plant species that have not yet been studied by scientists. So over here in the tropical rainforest, right, and the plants, there are like thousands, right? Thousands of plant species. This is the set of plant species from these tropical rainforests that scientists have not yet studied. Okay, so that's what this thing is. And then this next premise comments on this set, right, or the members in the set. It's very likely that many such plants also contain substances of medicinal value, right? So it's like, not all of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but very likely that lots of them can be made into these substances of medicinal value. Hence, right, here's the conclusion. And at this point, it's up to you. You know, it's a conditional conclusion. You've dealt with this before. You can take this and kick it up and just make it another premise, right? Just say, oh, by the way, the tropical rainforests are not going to be preserved, right? The tropical rainforests will disappear. Hence, conclusion, important types of medicine will never be developed. Or you can keep it as a conditional conclusion, right? I feel like here's probably a bit easier to keep it as a conditional. I mean, actually, I don't know. I say easier because it just maps better into my mind, but the important thing is you just recognize that this is a hypothetical, right? We're saying if the tropical rainforests are allowed to disappear, right? Allowed to disappear, then what? Then many of these important medicines will never be developed, okay? So does this conditional conclusion follow from these premises? Well, obviously the answer is no, because question 7 is telling us there are assumptions. There's more than one assumption, as often is the case when the questions get harder, right? The test writers engineer more than one assumption. And not all of those assumptions they engineer are equally apparent. In fact, some of them are more obvious, and they're intentionally more obvious to act as a red herring, to disguise the fact that there are other assumptions lurking. What's the more obvious assumption here? Well, this argument's logic is causal, right? It's causal. These premises are true, but does it follow that if the tropical rainforests are allowed to disappear, not preserved, that important types of medicine will never be developed, that these medicines are gone? See, doesn't that assume that in order to develop these medicines, we have to have these substances? I mean, that's not what we're being told. We're being told that these substances were developed into these medicines, but we were never told that these substances were necessary in order to develop these medicines, right? So that's what I'm thinking here. If the tropical rainforests are gone, okay, tragedy, right? They're gone, and we lose these plants, we lose these substances. But maybe, you know, like, are there other ways to develop these medicines? do you see? So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, one of the assumptions is kind of like a causal assumption that if we want to develop these important medicines, we must have these substances, right? This is a requirement. Because if this were false, if it's not the case that having these substances is a necessary condition to developing these medicines, then, I mean, forgive me for the blasphemy, let the rainforests burn. We'll find some other way to get these medicines developed, you see? So that, I think, is the more obvious assumption, and the test writers know this. And so they engineer an answer like D, which is a trap, which is something we need to sidestep. Now look at what D is saying. Any substance of additional value contained in those plants will eventually be discovered if those species are studied, right? If those species are studied. If we study those species that contain medicinal value, then what? Then we're guaranteed to discover them. Discover these new medicines or substances of medicinal value. Wait, that's not what, right? That's not what we need here. What we need is for the development of these important medicines to depend on the substances in those plants. Look at what D is saying. D is saying, if you just study this, you'll end up with important medicines. Doesn't that sound familiar? It kind of sounds like a backwards bridge in PSA, right? Like a sufficiency necessity confused bridge in PSA. I say kind of because the concepts here are actually a little bit different from what we need. But I feel like, I have a strong feeling that's what the test writers were going for when they engineer this trap answer, right? They kind of sense that some students will pick up on this causal assumption that in order to develop these important medicines, we must have these substances from the species, and they kind of flip it around. If you study, then you're guaranteed to develop those medicines. Well, no, right? No. Now look at B. Most of the tropical rainforest plants that contain substances of material can also be found growing in other types of environments. See, they're messing with us here. B is also trying to go after this assumption, but it's going at it in the wrong direction, so to speak. It's kind of weakening the argument because it's undercutting the assumption. It's telling us of the plants that contain substances of medicinal value, of the tropical rainforest plants, right? And in fact, most of them. What about them? Oh, look, they also grow in the tundra. I'm being facetious, but whatever, right? Other types of environment. You can also find them elsewhere. So, well, great then. Let the rainforest burn. We're going to find these plants elsewhere, and it's not true that the medicine will never be developed. So you see, this is not a necessary assumption, of course. This is, if anything, it's weakening the argument because it's undercutting that assumption. But, crucially, the test writers are making sure that we engage with this other assumption. Okay, I say other assumption because, well, there is a subtler assumption lurking in this argument. And so if you can, successfully evade these traps, then maybe you're alerted to the fact that there is some other assumption going on, and you can use process elimination and count on the correct answer choice to kind of clue you in. Okay, but it's a dangerous strategy because if you do that, well, you also got to, right, like all the wrong answers are also trying to get your attention as well. So you have to be able to evade the distractions. Okay, but if you can, then answer choice A contains a hint. It says there are substances of medicinal value contained in tropical rainforest plants, not yet studied by scientists, that differ from those substances already discovered in tropical rainforest plants. On first blush, you're just like, God, who cares, right? We're talking about causal assumptions. We're talking about like whether there are other ways to develop these important medicines that don't depend on these, plant substances. What the hell are you talking about? Like different. That's the trick. This is a much more subtle assumption. So you're very likely to overlook answer choice A and then move on to B, which is so, obviously in the wrong direction, but at least it's talking about this. right? So you eliminate B, and then you move on to C, and you get to D, and you're like, oh yeah, maybe D is the gets the assumption in the right direction, but then we talked about why that's not right. That's the trick, okay? So let's look at A. It does contain a hint in there. It's talking about substances of medicinal value differing from those substances that already discovered, right? The substances in the plants that we haven't yet studied, which is what the premise is talking about, being different from the substances that we already developed into medicines. This is absolutely necessary because A is just saying that the substances or the plants that the premises are talking about are new. They're new. They're not things that we already have. That absolutely is an assumption because if A were false, if all these, we haven't studied these thousands of plants, right? And it's very likely that many of them contain substances of medicinal value, sure, whatever, those ones I picked out. But if they're already stuff that we have, right? If they're overlapping with the stuff that we have, then what, right? What do you mean if they're not preserved? Medicine wasn't ever going to be developed anyway because there was nothing in here that was new. So you see the argument loses all of its power if A were false, right? This is a very subtle and very hard assumption to identify. I mean, look, I don't know about you. When I read this, I didn't think about this at all because I was completely caught up with this causal assumption. Okay, so now I want us to use the framework of sets to understand what's going on. Okay, so now let's go back to the context, which talks about the set of important medicines, right? That were, I don't know how many are in here. I'm just gonna, whatever you want, however many members you want to have. They're all developed from substances that came from plants, that came from rainforests, right? So this is a set of medicines, right, that were developed in such a way. And then now look at the premise, right? The premise, I'm gonna collapse these two, okay, to just this part over here. So yeah, there are some plants with substances that very likely contain medicinal value. Okay, so now the conclusion says, oh, if these are not, the rainforests are not preserved, meaning these things are gone, then what? Then you lose out on members, right? Meaning, like, look, this guy could have been in here, could have gained membership in here, and this guy could have gained membership in here, but too bad. What happened? The rainforest burned down, we lost all these, so you lost out on members. You could have expanded by this much, right? Gained this much, and we lost out on it because the rainforest burned. Okay, right? Fair enough. And we were thinking, well, hold on, if we lose it here, that doesn't mean it's lost here because maybe these members can come from somewhere else.
Okay, guys, we're off to a practice question now. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in. I am studying, so you guys know when I do study lives, I don't really talk. Feel free to drop the comments, though. Glad you guys could return to the live. I have yet to make a Q&A live. You'll know it's a Q&A live when I post Q&A on it, so don't worry, it's coming.
let's take a look at this question, necessary assumption. Now, I think what's challenging about this question is two attractive wrong answers and a very subtle correct answer. Hopefully you're able to think in terms of sets. In terms of structure, we just got context, premise, conclusion. You got film preservation. What is it? You got transfer old movies from unstable, deteriorating nitrate material to stable acetate film. Okay, so some sort of transfer, right? But this is time-consuming, expensive process, and we just can't do all of it before they disintegrate. Yeah, so if you think about the old set of deteriorating film, they're fading over time, right? Like you wait a year, the set shrinks down. You wait another year, it shrinks down some more. Wait another year, it shrinks down some more because, well, yeah, that's disappearing, right? That's deteriorating. So what do? Well, we're trying to take the members in this set. We're trying to get it over into this other set called stable acetate, right? Take you, transfer it over. Take you, move it over. Take you, move it over. But the problem is it takes time to do that, and we just can't get all of them over there quickly enough, right? So I'm gonna definitely lose some of you. I don't know if it's you, or all of you, or all of you. I don't know how much of you I'm gonna lose. Okay, so now look at the conclusion. The conclusion says that some films from the earliest years of Hollywood would not be preserved. What? Where did that come from? Right, the conclusion talks about a different set. Films from the earliest years of Hollywood. Are we sure that they have membership here? Right, that's one question. And if they do have membership here, some of the earliest films from Hollywood, are we sure that they're going to be the ones that are, in the Left Behind group, or are they going to be the ones that get priority transfer group? Those are two questions that float to the top of our minds when we view the argument using the framework of sets, right? And within that framework, D represents one of those considerations. Some films from the earliest year Hollywood, the set that the conclusion talks about, currently exists solely in their original material. Meaning, yeah, out of this set, at least some of you, right? At least some of you have membership over here in this set, right? In their original material, meaning the original material of unstable nitrate film, right? So that's this set. It doesn't guarantee this conclusion, right? It doesn't justify the argument because even though you have membership here, I mean, again, remember that second question we asked is, do you get priority transfer or are you the ones that get left behind? We need to figure that out before we can say whether this argument runs through. But that doesn't matter. This is a necessary assumption question, right? This absolutely has to be true because if this were false, that means you're saying there is no connection here. No, it's not true that some films from the earliest exist solely in their original, meaning every single film from the earliest year Hollywood already exists in some other form, rather. Well then, okay, great, then this whole premise, right, like all of these premises about, how we need to transfer and they're running out of time, what does that have to do with Hollywood films, the earliest years Hollywood films? They already exist in some other, do you see what I mean? So like if you negate D, then the entire support structure disappears. So using the framing of sets allows us to see that D is a correct answer, but you also have to count on your ability to evade very attractive traps. A is one such trap. It says no new technology for transferring will ever be developed, right? Transferring all movies from nitrated. Like this transfer technology that we have now, this is it. This is the best we're ever going to have. Nothing new is going to be developed. See, if you're trapped today, I mean, sure, A definitely helps improve the reasoning. If A is true, then we are limited to what we have now. The transfer rate is what it is. We can't, find a new transfer method or improve upon this existing one to transfer faster. And no, those are all precluded by A. So surely it helps the reasoning and the argument. Definitely get some left behind, then yeah, maybe some of the left behind will be Hollywood. But it still requires this, of course. But I'm just saying A helps the reasoning. But the problem is that A isn't necessary. Right? We've seen this before, where answer choices on some of the harder questions, harder NA questions, strengthen the reasoning. So in other words, if this were a strengthening question, sure, A will be right. But it's not necessary. it's okay for the argument if some new technology eventually gets developed, right? Like, how does that hurt the argument if some new technology eventually gets developed? I have at least two questions I want to ask. When is it going to get developed? If you're telling me it's going to get developed 100 years from now, well, it's too late already. It doesn't matter, right? The argument already runs through. These films are disappeared, or won't be preserved. So you see, it depends on when it gets done. And then it also depends on what the new technology is. Right? Just because you develop a new technology, let's say next week, okay, I mean, if it improves the transfer process by like 0.002%, I don't know, I mean, we're probably still going to lose some. You see what I mean? So that's how you can tell that this isn't necessary. So C is another attractive answer. So I think, like I said, part of the difficulty is you have to get past A, you have to get past C before you could even look at D, right? And we mentioned that D is kind of weak, right? Whereas A and C are not. C is kind of strong too, just like A. Not many films to Hollywood have already been transferred. Right? C is saying, you know what? Of this set over here, most of you, right? Most of you are not already here. Right, most of you are not already here. Okay, sure, that improves the reasoning because now I'm thinking, well, most of you, that means you are in your original form, right? So most of you get thrown into the set. Well then, yeah, it does improve the odds that some of you will get left out, right? Some of you will be over here on the left out side. Okay, but so what, right? It just improves the reasoning. Is it necessary? It's not necessary. I don't need most of you to get thrown in here. What do I actually need? I just need at least some of you to get thrown in here into this set, right? And that's what D gives us. So for C, you can contrast that with D to really highlight the distinction between a necessary assumption versus an assumption that powerfully improves the reasoning, but might not be necessary to the reasoning. And then finally, B and E are probably not as attractive as A and C. They're both wrong. They're kind of not relevant, or at least E is definitely not relevant. B seems to be hurting the argument, I think. B says transferring film from nitrate to acetate is not the only way of preserving them, right? It's telling me explicitly that there's some other way, right? This is one way, sure, transferring from nitrate to acetate is one way to preserve. He's saying, oh, you know what? It's not the only way to preserve them. There's some other way. And in fact, let me tell you something else. This other way is cheaper, right? This other way is cheaper than this way. So that does harm to this argument. Because if there's some other way to preserve them, I don't know, maybe for the Hollywood films, we use this other way. So you see what I mean? Like, B seems to be contradicting this premise. I thought film preservation required this method, this transfer method. B's like, I don't know. At least it implies that there's some other method, right? So that's an analysis trying to figure out the relationship B actually has to the argument, which is, additional work. Because really, all you need to do is figure out if this is necessary. Obviously, it's not necessary, right? Who needs this, right? But the next step is figuring out, well, what kind of relationship does B have to the argument? Okay, that's how you start to put these wrong answers in these recurring boxes. Okay, so now E says the least popular films from earliest years are the ones most likely to be lost. Okay, I don't know, this is certainly not necessary. In fact, nobody cares what the characteristics are of the films that are going to get lost. I mean, look at the conclusion. Some films of the set of films from the earliest year Hollywood, like we said, some of you are going to get lost, right? Some of you are going to get lost. Well, what kind of assumptions are involved? One, that you guys have membership in this set, right? And two, that not only do you have membership in the set, you're kind of closer to this end of the set, the left behind set, right? Look at what E is doing. E doesn't address either of those assumptions. E's just like, oh, let me tell you something else about these things, right? These 4 dots that you picked out. They're probably going to be the not popular ones. What? Right? What? I think all E is doing is just making a naked appeal to your intuitions about something tangentially related, right? If we're talking about film preservation, like really old films, just ask me out of the blue, give me some characteristics of films that you think won't be preserved. I'm gonna say something like this. I'm gonna say something like what he is saying. Oh, the least popular films, they're the ones that are not gonna get preserved. They're the ones that get lost. Okay, fine, that makes sense. But that has nothing to do with the argument. All right, let's take a look at this question. Here's a pretty tough question. Assumption required by the argument. Difficulty of this question arises from the fact that the argument contains different kinds of assumptions, one of which is more obvious than the other. If you've spotted the obvious assumption, then your attention might be distracted from the more subtle assumption. That should sound familiar, right? I mean, because it's the same technique that the test writers employed in the medicine from rainforest question. Okay, so it's not like it's only in these two questions that they're going to use that technique. They're going to use this throughout the rest of the logical reasoning questions that you haven't seen yet. Okay, so let's review the stimulus. Here we have educators speaking to us. First, stipulating that you want to reduce class sizes in our school district. You have to hire more teachers. I mean, that sounds about right. You want to have a smaller class, you need more teachers, or kick out students. Actually, that's maybe a better idea, just kick students out. Right, okay, I'm kidding. You need more teachers. However, there's a shortage of qualified teachers in the region, and although students receive more individualized instruction when classes are smaller, education suffers when teachers are underqualified. Okay, so right here is where they're introducing the distraction. And really, I think it's only in hindsight that it's clear that it's a distraction, but nonetheless, you know, it's important to analyze the techniques that the test writers are using to fool us, right? To distract us. See, here, the premise tells us that there's a shortage of qualified teachers in the region. Before you can even think about this claim, the argument wants you to think about this half-baked cost-benefit analysis. Although students receive more individualized instruction when classes are smaller, right? So that's a pro, presumably, right? Presumably it's a pro. Individualized instruction. Oh, but there's a con. Education suffers when teachers are underqualified. So our mind is drawn towards this, you know, I call this a half-baked cost-benefit analysis because, well, there are at least two things here. First of all, individualized instruction, is that a pro? It doesn't say it, right? We have to assume that individualized instruction is a pro. So there's one. Whereas with a con, education suffers, that's just explicitly stated. So I don't need to be like, oh, is that bad? Well, the word suffer means it's bad. Right? So this is definitely a con. But then the other assumption is that how do these two shake out? Right? How do they stack up against each other? Maybe this presumed pro, is so beneficial that it outweighs this con, this cost, right? Or maybe not. Maybe this is so heavily negative that it destroys this benefit. So just as we're thinking about this, look at the conclusion. Reducing class size will probably not improve overall student achievement, and we're thinking, aha, I got you. I know what you did here. This is a cost-benefit analysis assumption, and I'm going to go into the answers looking for the cost-benefit assumption, right? And it's all a setup because, well, see, look at D here. It says hiring more teachers wouldn't improve achievement of any student in the school district if most or all the teachers hired were underqualified. D is really...
I got this question right. I don't even watch the video. I only really watch the video, guys, if I get a question wrong. Not that I'm saying I got like the previous questions correct, but if it was labeled, because normally when you answer a question, it's labeled as if it was an easier category, medium category, or hard category. So the ones that I just got right, this one, and I think the one previously and the one before that, they were labeled as hard, but I got them right. So I just wanted to rewatch the video, but the video's kind of boring. So now I'm going to do a drill. A drill is essentially a practice question. Let me take a little break, see the comments. Welcome to everyone who's new, currently studying for the LSAT. Thank you for your compliment. The man, the myth, the legend. Cool name. Thank you so much for your kind words. Welcome back, Mulberry. What did Taylor say? Just to sit there. Well, thank you for leaving a comment, Taylor. Glad you left a comment. Hopefully you read the title of the video and my pinned comment. It is a quiet study session, so that is why I'm just sitting here quietly. But thanks for leaving a comment. At least you took time to write that. Welcome, Mulberry. Glad you could join this stream. Mulberry, thanks. You don't have to respond to them. I just responded, and it's in the title. That just shows sometimes people don't read stuff that's in front of them, but that's okay. Okay, so let's do a drill now, guys. So I'm going to go back to quietness right now. That's a lot of words. Why do they give so much words? You get a sneak peek on some questions I gotta answer. Like, look at all those words, guys. Conclusion drawn depends on which of the following assumption. The Board of Trustees of the hence the board. increase its funding for civilian scientific research. Therefore, in order to keep from the argument relies on the assumption among North American school-age children there is a strong positive correlation between obesity and the amount of television watched. Therefore, with the arrival of interactive television, obesity among North American school children will increase. It's A or B. Which one of the following is an assumption on which the argument depends? The ability of mammals to control their internal body temperature. Internal body temperature is a factor in the development of their brains and intelligence. This can be seen in the following facts.
so we are in a new logical reasoning territory now. And unlike most of the questions that we've been doing up to this point, AP questions, they don't require that we analyze the argument for its logical strength. Right? We don't really need to identify what assumptions are being made, how to exploit or patch up those assumptions. So you can say in that sense it's, argument part questions are easier, right? But it has its own difficulties. Like method of reasoning and flaw questions that we will later encounter, argument part questions require that we have an understanding of the structure of the argument and that we be able to describe how the argument proceeds. And it's in the describing that a new kind of difficulty arises. We're going to encounter in the answer choices a lot of abstract language, general language, referential language that we're going to have to pull down and lasso back to the specific language of the stimulus. And this isn't something that we've had to do a lot before, but it's going to play a crucial role in AP. Okay, so with that said, let's now examine the question stem. Every AP stem is going to contain an excerpt that comes from the stimulus. And we're going to call the excerpt the excerpt. And our job is just to
I'll put my clothes to dry. Why do I have like a bump on my lip for? All I ate yesterday, did I eat too much salty stuff? Or I could have burned myself. That chicken patty was really hot. So I went to sleep and I woke up and look at this. What is that? Why is that there? Unless something bit me. Could have been the chicken patty because that thing was hot. I have to call my mom and it's messed up. I'll just do it on my face.
Figure out what role this excerpt plays in the argument. And we have a couple of basic options here. It could be context, right, which includes other people's position. It could be premise, major premise, sub-conclusion, minor premise, main conclusion, right? These are the basic labels that we have. Now, the test writers get creative, right? Sometimes they just use the labels that we have. Sometimes they describe the conclusion, right? They'll say it's a conclusion without using the word conclusion, like, oh, it's a claim that receives support from the other claims. Well, that's a conclusion. Okay, so our job, of course, is to figure out the role, right? The role or the function of the excerpt. Now, just like the other STEM types, once you get enough exposure, you'll be able to quickly skim, right? Just skim this part and immediately identify that this is an AP question. Okay, so you have two clues. One is that these questions, the AP question stems, tend to be a lot longer. Now, this one in particular is an exception to the rule. This one's quite short, but the overwhelming majority of AP question stems are very long. Okay, and hence because they excerpt, right? They excerpt something from the stimulus. The other telltale sign is that the question stems are not just.
I put the dryer on. Seriously? About to put the dryer on. How come you guys didn't tell me to put the dryer on? No.
Okay, it's partially generic, right? This is the language that's generic, but this is a language that's specific. Okay, so that's another clue that you're looking at AP. Now, the final point about the question set is that we're going to change our approach a little bit. On the first pass of the step, we're going to quickly identify that this is an AP, okay, using the clues. And then we're going to turn attention to the stimulus, read the stimulus, do what we have to do here, and then take a second pass at the STEM where we actually focus on the excerpt. Okay, so on the first pass, if you are not focusing on this, it takes a lot of time, you gain nothing from it. So on the first pass, just identify that you are doing AP. Okay, then come to the stimulus, analyze it, and then we'll return to the question STEM. And it's only on the second pass that we focus on the excerpt. Okay, let's look at the stimulus. It says people often admonish us to learn the lessons of history. All right, that sounds like it's other people's position. Other people are telling us, hey, listen, kid, you gotta learn the lessons of history, right? So we have confirmation of that with the word but, indicating a transition away from context / other people's position over to argument. And then immediately following but, we have the phrase even if, which indicates a throwaway or a concession claim, right? The author is conceding that, look, I'm not sure it is so easy to discover what the past really was like, but it doesn't matter much to my argument, because even if it was easy to discover what the past is really like, here's the point I really want to make. It's nearly impossible to discover history's lessons. That makes me want to go why. right? If I want to ask why, that's my suspicion. This is the conclusion, and it kind of makes sense because, people are telling us to learn the lessons of history, and then the author's like, okay, first of all, is it really easy to figure out what the past was? Or surely that's a precondition. If you're going to learn the lessons of history, you need to know what history even was. Okay, but even if you could learn what history was, I still want to say that it's not possible, right, or nearly so, or nearly impossible, to discover history's lessons. Why? Right? Why? So these are going to be premises supporting this conclusion. And I see, for example, which is great because that indicates that, an example is coming up. So premise, right? Premise. So the author takes the First World War to be an example. We're supposed to learn the lessons of it. Yeah, that's what they say, right? Admonish us to learn the lesson of history. This is a big historical event, sure. So, for example, you're supposed to learn this. But what are they? I suppose this is a rhetorical question. The author is saying we don't know what they are. And the author says, were we ever to discover what they are? The they here references lessons, right? Lessons. And were we to ever discover what the lessons of the First World War are, it's not clear that we could ever apply the lessons, for we shall never again have a situation just like World War I. Okay, so I want you to I don't know if you have this urge to scrutinize the logical relationship here. I mean, coming off of weekend strength and evaluate all these assumption-based questions, that's my first instinct. Is I want to be like, I actually don't think this is a very strong argument at all. First of all, you haven't made a really good case that it's impossible to discover history's lessons. I mean, you use the First World War as an example, but all you're saying is that you don't know what the lessons are. But then why does that mean that it's hard to discover what the lessons are? And the second point about applicability, well, kind of misses the point, because you're just talking about discovering the lessons. I mean, applying the lesson is another thing altogether. I mean, I suppose you'd have to supply an additional assumption that the only point of learning lessons is to apply.
I need to do a drill. They're just showing me a video before. I need to do a practice question and then see, because that video's not making that much sense. So let me do a practice question, see how I do. Guys, this thing... Wait, is that what? Did it get bigger? I don't know what this is. Oh my gosh, I need to call my mom. What is this? I need to call my mom. This is... What is this? Is this from salty food or hot food? Because yesterday I ate a lot of cheese nips and goldfish. And then I had a chicken patty, which was really hot. How do I get this off my mouth? This is... What is this? Let me call my mom. This is crazy. Brief intermission, guys. Oh my gosh. Sorry, God. What is this on my face? I don't have anything to put on it. I don't have chain. I don't have a chain in a cage. Do you have chains in cage for yourself? Mom.
Hello?
Look at my face.
What happened?
You don't see this on my lip? What is this?
Wash your mouth out.
It's like a bump on my lip and it's getting bigger.
Wash your mouth. Maybe something you ate too much salt. Look at her lips. Look at her lips going. Something she ate, right?
There's a bump on my lip.
Something on your ate. Something you must have ate. Wash your mouth out with salt water.
What?
Well, you must have ate something.
All I had yesterday, I ate a lot of cheese nips. And then I had the chicken patty, which was really hot.
Yeah, something you ate or could be something you ate. Wash your mouth out with salt water. You don't have any lemon, right? It's gonna sting a little.
No, I don't have lemon. This thing is messed.
Yeah, you probably burned your lips yesterday. You said it was really hot, right?
Yeah.
Okay, is that the spot that you burned?
This thing is getting bigger though, and it's red. You can look at
You
it.
gotta put ice on. Wait for that burn.
If you look in the mirror. You see
Yeah,
it?
because you burned your lip from the patty. It was so hot inside, the internal heat.
Oh.
Let me see. It's gonna heal. Is it hurting?
I mean, when I touch it, yeah.
Is it hurting?
When I touch it.
Don't touch it. Put a piece. Put some ice on it.
I don't have ice. Where do I get ice from?
You don't have ice. You don't have anything cold.
Water.
Put one of your bowl of food on it. That's frozen.
So don't use the salt water?
Well, you can wash it out with salt water. That's the thing. That's good to clean. Just wash your mouth out with a little salt water, warm water, not cold water. But you gotta burn from your beef patty. So in the future, if you make beef patty, let it cool before you eat it. Because it's truly hungry. Remember, your lip and your mouth is very sensitive.
Where's my spoons at? How did I lose my spoons? Guys, I have a burn or a bump on my lip.
Yeah, burn. That's a burn for the beef patty. When you put your lip on the beef patty, see, your hands become accustomed to heat hot things because when I'm cooking, I normally say keep your hands out and I will let you test it.
You
So,
see it, guys?
but that had to be extremely hot. You lucky.
I'm lucky. What else could happen?
You didn't burn your tongue eating it, did you?
No.
Yeah, so you burned your lip.
Ew, this salt water look nasty. This don't look good, guys.
Put enough
Ew.
water inside of it. Let me see how it looks.
Guys, I'm making salt water right now because I ate a chicken patty yesterday and it was really hot. So for some reason, it now gave me a burn on my lip. That's like a bump, kind of. See? You see it? Mom?
Oh, put more water in it. Damn, why it look like that?
I don't know. I'll just stir it up. I'm going to gargle this whole cup of salt water, guys. It's a big cup. It looked kind of sus though, as some people will say. So hopefully I'll be okay.
You're not just washing your mouth out with the salt water.
It's for my lips, so that's why I'm like that when the salt water is in my mouth. I don't know if it's doing anything, guys.
Put a little ice. If it's swelling, put a little ice on. Put one of your frozen food, the bowl, on top of your lips if you don't have ice, just to help with the swelling. But yeah, just to help decrease it a little.
It's a big cup, man.
Good. Do a review. I know you did this before, but I want you to go through a review, make sure you master it all.
You got work to do later.
He's now logging onto his computer. He's doing a review on energy signs. You want to plug up the headphones? They plugged up?
helping. It's going down. It could be because water makes your skin like malleable.
Salt clean salt. She said it's going down. Salt clean a lot of stuff. Salt kills a lot of.
But it could also be going down because my lip is now wet with water. Once your skin dries, doesn't it get like, I don't know, tougher or whatever?
You have any Neosporin or anything like that?
I think so.
The only thing is unless you had a big bug while you were sleeping that came and bit you on that.
No, I felt it last night. Like I was starting to feel it last night, but it felt like it was going away last night, and I was just sitting down, and it came back bigger.
It's gonna go away on its own. But it's gonna go away on its own. Let me see it.
Ew, it's nasty.
Yeah, wipe your lip. You got salt on top of your lip. Yeah, it's gonna go away. If you see if you want to make an appointment with the nurse in your school, then you just for her to check it out. If you wake up tomorrow,
Okay.
if you wake up and see a 12 just for your own time. But I believe it's you got burned from the beef patty.
Chicken patty. I don't eat beef. Ow.
Or, chicken patty. Or, another thing could be, you've been eating a lot of goldfish, but then if there was anything...
Normally when I eat salt, bumps get on my face. It's never on my lip.
You said when you eat a lot of salt, what happened?
Bumps go on my face, like my forehead, not my lip. This is something else in my lip. That's not because of the food.
Yeah, but do you have any oranges? Did you eat the oranges that I want?
Yeah, I still have them.
Did you eat any of them?
No.
Well, you don't listen to mom.
What's that gonna do? There's a bump on my lip.
You've been calling me mother the whole end of the week. So you don't listen to your mother. The orange are vitamins. It helps your body build up whatever it got to build up to attack any type of foreign thing. It just protects you. It's excellent to suck a fresh orange. Before you start today, you should cut an orange and suck an orange. Say that's your vitamins for the morning. Can't wait until you not feeling well and go, oh, I'm not feeling well. But if you was
Okay, we get it. Okay, bye. Thanks. I can't remember you. I'm going to get frozen food to put on my face, guys. Because I don't know what this is, man. I think now you're not cold. Just gonna fall down. What is it? Just oh, it's not chow mein. This is rice. I think all my chow mein's finished. find my code. Can't see anything. I can't see. I need another one, guys. Who is that? Oh, great. Nice hair. Okay, guys, I'll log off now. Thanks for tuning into the live, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll be back with more soon.